I am a survivor of such abuse by my uncle and godfather, Dominic Praviti Jr. Because he was my godfather, he had access to me with no questions asked. I managed to avoid the reality of what this entailed until my early 20s, when I was hospitalized and began to confront what had happened to me. At the age of 24, I decided to tell my mother about the abuse. My therapist at the time arranged for my mother to come in for a meeting on the evening of January 7th, 1988. During this meeting, I would explain to my mom that her brother sexually molested me. Tragically, she died unexpectedly that morning at her family business. She was 52. I never had a chance to tell her. My sisters, brother, and I felt a strong need to tell my aunts and uncles about Dominic. When we told them about the sexual molestation, they all acknowledged and understood the truth of what I had remembered. In fact, they said they knew and would support me in any way. One of my aunts responded openly about her concerns for her own children. When Dominic was confronted, he told me he never thought this would come back to him. He wrote me a letter of confession and said he asked God for forgiveness. Over time, it became clear to me that this family's main concern was to keep me quiet and not to support me. Feeling confused and not wanting to lose my family, I chose silence. I've spent the last 24 years of my life in extensive therapy and hospitalizations. I have lost connections with my friends, my former career as a teacher and coach, and the possibility to have children and a family to call my own. During those 24 years, my sisters and brother navigated through life, getting married and having children with no adults to assist them. I grew up in a time where family loyalty was strong. I never went outside the family for help. Doctors, teachers, friends, coaches. So I thought, having told the adults in my family, I would be supported, but obviously that was not the case. Dominic, you took away my childhood, my adolescence. I have struggled all my adult life. You have lied about your wrongdoings from the beginning and used what you thought was power to abolish my family and dishonored my mother by doing so. You lied to our family. You persuaded them to turn their back on us. Then you took our grandmother away when we needed her most. To all the adults involved, shame on you for covering this up. Today I can say that I am strong enough to speak out. I have suffered enough, and I'm not hiding anymore. Today I seize this moment to take all that shame and guilt and give it back to the Pravitis because they own it. I will continue to gain strength to do the things I was supposed to do before I was forced down that dark road. Giving up is not an option. I am ready to live. I see you all, and I am here. But there is no recourse for Dominic Praviti. So I challenge and ask the legislature how it is possible for someone to file a complaint within the time constraints of the civil statute of limitations. Every victim is different, and to be fair to all victims, there should be no time limit. We should be able to obtain justice in our own time and at our own pace. It takes years for this to happen. Filing a complaint is not even a thought to the victim at the time when memories occur, because they are trying to stay alive and heal wounds that hurt so deep in their soul. Let's hope that silence is in the past. As an adult, it is my moral obligation to break my silence and lead by example for the children in my family. I stand here today with convictions and never want any child to be silenced. We all want to believe our children are safe. It's our job to listen, observe, and ask questions, and allow them to feel safe to talk. The unfortunate truth about my story is that it may sound all too familiar. I know I'm not alone. 1 out of 4 women have been sexually abused. 85% of those women by a family member. My hope is that there will be continued victims coming forward and fewer children being abused. The Massachusetts legislature really needs to consider the repercussions of what an adult survivor needs to recover and rethink those time constraints for that recovery. Thank you, and I appreciate this opportunity to tell my story, which will give me strength in my continued recovery.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask Roseanne?
When the abuse took place, you were living in, or when it started, you were living in Waltham?
Yes, I was born and grew up in Waltham.
Where did the majority of the incidents happen?
At his place of business,
Which is?
Leechmere Auto Wash, which was a car wash. The Maverick nightclub, which was a lounge and nightclub in North Reading in the 70s. At his home, in his pool, pretty much wherever we went together.
Can you speak a little bit more about your relationship with him? I know he was your godfather. You mentioned he had a lot of access to you. Where was your parents? I mean, where were your parents during all these times that he was with you? Did he just have confidence that you would be able to take care of you, basically?
Basically, I was with him weekly, and whenever he came into the neighborhood, he would beep his horn and everyone knew he was there. And as I got older, I actually did say to my mother, you know, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And her response was, it's your godfather, he loves you. So, I mean, it was that sort of family thinking that I would be okay.
Was he married with children? Is he married with children?
He was married. His 2 children are much younger than me.
Aside from telling your mother that you didn't want to go, when was the first time you told someone what was actually happening versus just, I don't want to go to see my uncle?
I never did.
So it was long after the fact?
I never told a teacher, never told a coach, never told a friend. Never talked about it in my family.
Did your mother ever ask why you didn't want to go? Or just say he was your uncle? I mean, did she ever inquire why you didn't want to go?
Nope, it was just, that's your godfather, he loves you. And basically that's it. In an Italian family, it's sort of, like what Carmen said earlier, it's, you know, you just, I don't know.
Your aunts, you mentioned that you got the sense that they might have known about that this was going on.
Well, I never did have that feeling, but when my sisters and brother and I confronted them, the first thing they said was, we knew.
And didn't want to believe it.
And yeah, basically they just didn't want to believe it.
Did they know it was going on with you, or just?
That's what they said to me, is, we know. And they wanted to support me. They actually asked me if I wanted to confront my uncle and if they wanted to be in the room with me while I confronted him. And that's when I confronted him, and he thought it would never come back, and following was the confession letter. And I thought that I was being supported. But now looking back, I really believe in the background, they were planning, and eventually they weren't our family anymore.
Could you describe what that was like for you when you confronted your uncle?
Scary, because I was in a room like this. It was a conference room at his business, and my aunt and uncle were downstairs. I asked them to wait. I wanted to go up, and thinking back now, they probably gave him a heads up, but at the time I didn't think that. I was pretty naive and innocent, so I went upstairs, and he just welcomed me in, and we sat in silence for, it felt like a lifetime. I don't really know how long, but it was a long time. And I kept thinking in my head, like, is he gonna say anything? You know, am I gonna be the one to have to break the ice? So finally we sat down in 2 comfortable chairs facing each other, and I just looked at him and I said, I need to talk to you about what happened sexually. And that's when he put his head down and said, I never thought this would come back to me. It was very uncomfortable.
I noticed that in his letter he mentions this incident. Did he ever admit to multiple incidents, or was it just one that he admitted to?
He didn't admit to a lot in that letter. In fact, I was really shocked to get that letter. And also, with my recovery, I didn't know really the extent of what happened to me. They kind of came back in small chunks as I got older. I remembered more and more and more, and I think that was really kind of maybe my brain to protect me. But when he wrote, I don't know exactly what he wrote, an incident or...
Yeah, I think it's...
Was that incident?
This incident.
Oh, this incident. Yeah,
The incident as a whole.
yeah, as a whole maybe.
At the time that you signed the release and agreement document in 1991, did you have an attorney when you signed it?
I don't remember signing that document. I do not remember signing that document.
Did he actually give you the amount that was stated there?
I did receive an amount from him, and I believe it was within what was stated, and basically that took care of my college loans. And I was, at that time, I was like happy. You know, I was in my early 20s. I paid off all my school loans. I had no debt. But I didn't realize what the future was going to bring me. You know, I was a very competent, I was a teacher, I was a coach, I was a mentor, and over time I just lost all my confidence and my ability to be able to get up and face the world.
You said, or Attorney Durso mentioned that recently some new memories have started to come up. Is there anything you can tell us about some of those incidents?
I can tell you that the incidents that were recently recalled were the ones when I was at the Maverick, and they were pretty horrific and horrible.
And they involved him bringing you there, and other men were involved in that?
Yeah, at that place.
Do you recall how many other men?
I would say a group, probably like 3 or 4. I can't really recall.
How old were you at the time of that? When did that occur?
When I was like 13, 14 years old. And,
So at that point, the abuse from your uncle had been going on for almost
yeah,
10 years.
he started out really slow, and I think he groomed me and just taught me, and it was a lifetime. Yeah.
Have you kept in contact at all with the Peruvian family?
Once they took my grandmother away, we tried to write her. We tried to go to her home, which is attached to his house, and we weren't allowed access to her. And I remember shopping at a market, a local market that is in the area where we all live, and she'd be with my aunt, and I saw my grandmother, and I just said, Gram, you know, it's me, what are you doing? You know, like begging to just have her, and my aunt just taking her away. After losing my mother, that was her mother, and we were all so close to her, and the way they took her away, it was bad. And after that, it was, I have not had any contact with them at all.
And that last incident was when, you said?
Which,
When you saw your grandma last?
oh, I don't know. Yeah, probably like 89.
Oh, wow.
Were there any other children in the family, or any that you were aware of that your uncle may have done this to as well, or do you?
We're not going to make any specific allegations about that. One of Roseanne's motivations here is to make sure that no other children might be exposed to this, but we're not saying anything specific about anybody. Brian?
2 questions. When did you receive this letter?
After I confronted him, that letter came to me a week later.
Do you know around year or month?
Let's see. What is her name? Yeah, right. It was in '88.
1980.
No further questions?
I'm sorry, I just have one more question. You have something written on your hand. Do you mind if I ask what that is?
Oh. Enough. I really believe strongly that, you know, people just all heal differently, and having a set date for a time period to take action it just isn't something that a lot of people are thinking about until they get strong enough. And in a way, the statute protects the perpetrator, because they know how much time is involved before they can be criminally or civilly taken suit, and once that passes, they're basically free. And so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Jetta Bernier to say a few words to you. Jetta is the Executive Director of Mass Citizens for Children, and she is the co-chair of CORSAL, the Coalition to Reform Sexual Abuse Laws, and she's going to speak to you just very briefly about this issue of the statute of limitations.
Thank you, Carmen. And thank you very much, Roseanne, for your bravery and your courage. Roseanne mentioned in her presentation that we needed to make sure that legislators understood that victims come to understand their sexual abuse at different times, at different paces, and that they need to understand the impact that this has on victims. But I think what struck me about that statement is that many in the legislature are in fact aware of precisely those facts. When we first pushed with many other colleagues and survivors and other advocates for the repeal of the statute of limitations law several years ago, we held public hearings, we held State House rallies, we had many individual meetings with legislators, with the Speaker of the House, with key leadership people, and they get it. They get it. We succeeded in moving the statute of limitations further in the sense that before you had to be 31 years of age before the clock ran out. In other words, 15 years after your 16th birthday. Through the advocacy of a lot of individuals, we were able to get that pushed up to 27 years past the 16th birthday. So now you can be 42 years old before your personal clock runs out, before you can go and report to the authorities or can file a civil case. This past year, we've continued to lobby the State House because we now want repeal. Reform is simply not enough. Not when you begin to consider the impact that this has on the lives of individuals like Roseanne and so many others. We've held State House rallies, again. We've had incredible public hearings. Members of the Judiciary Committee have listened to people like Al Chesney, NFL player, now in his 50s, abused by a police officer in Washington when he was 12 years of age. His life was forever changed in many important ways. We listened to Heather Connor, who was sexually abused when she was in Brookline at the hands of Bob Hewlett, who was a former tennis coach and now sits in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. We listened to many other individuals that day talk about their experiences, urging, begging, crying in some instances, for the Judiciary Committee to finally listen and to essentially open the door for the rest of the legislature to take a vote on this important bill. We sit here today and the action has still not been taken. The bill is still in committee, and even though we know that many individuals, and I would vouch to say the majority of individuals sitting on the Judiciary Committee would in fact move to approve this bill and push it further in the process, the bill still remains stuck. And so, given what you've heard today from Roseanne, I think the question is, what is it that's preventing the Judiciary Committee from taking strong action on this bill and for moving it forward? As I mentioned, if we get this House on the floor of the House, we know we have the votes for passage. Other states have passed this legislation: California, Maine, Florida, New Jersey, we believe, just recently. And so this can be done. So as members of the press, we can't tell you why the bill is not moving, but we can ask you to start asking questions of the Judiciary Committee and its chair and its members to find out why it's not moving forward. I think we can honor our wonderful advocate here today, our survivor. I don't want to call her a victim, our survivor here today, Roseanne. I think we can honor her by asking questions and not simply allowing the status quo to continue. So I thank you very much for your attention.
So you, if I can just ask, so you'll be looking to totally get rid of the statute of limitations, not just extend it out another 5 years or 10 years, but just there's no end to when you could claim?
Yes, I mean, I think if you've heard survivors and victims talk about the impact that this has had in their lives, they liken it to a murder of their soul. There's no statute of limitations for murder, and nor should there be for this very heinous crime.
And states all over the country have managed to do that. Our cousins up in Maine, who some people look down on as being a little backwards, are quite far ahead of us. They managed to eliminate the statute of limitations entirely for both civil and criminal cases. Florida, a very diverse state, has done the same thing. A number of states have done it. The world doesn't end. It's not, there are no bad consequences. What happens is people who do these things to people like Roseanne are able to be prosecuted, they're able to be sued, they're able to publicly be identified as dangerous to our children. That's the whole point of this.
I'm a little unclear. You said civil, during your statement, you said you're calling for the repeal of the civil statute.
And the criminal statute of limitations.
And the criminal statute.
That's correct.
Yes.
The copy of House 469, the Protection from Sexual Predators Act of 2001, has a number of different components. And clearly, repeal of civil, repeal of criminal are the two issues that are top on that list.
And also would change some of the reporting requirements. You saw recently that New England Conservatory had a situation where they had a person working there and there were no reports made. One prosecution has been brought in Massachusetts since 1970-something, when the reporting law was first adopted. And there was a $1,000 fine imposed as a result of that. We want there to be a $100,000 fine on any entity that has people who should report and don't. So you have your Penn State, you have your Syracuse, you have all the things you've been hearing about over and over again. If the people who have the responsibility within the organizations don't make the reports they're required to make by law, the organization suffers. At the same time, we tell the organizations, if you have to adopt a training program, and if you train your people so that they know what their obligations are, that'll be a defense to you. But if you don't care, if you say it's not our problem, you get hit big. And unfortunately, money is one of the few things that big organizations seem to respond to.
Under the current law, how can you file this lawsuit?
Well, it's not easy. There are, I do a lot of these suits, and some of them are successful, some of them aren't. Basically, what the law says is you have 3 years from the time that you understand you've been harmed by particular conduct. Because Roseanne has recently understood that she was harmed by those acts that she described, where her uncle took her to other men, we're arguing that those acts are new and they allow her to bring suit. It's going to be a dogfight in court, I can tell you that. In other states, we wouldn't have that issue. We would just go in and the jury would get to decide who's telling the truth and who's not. And I don't worry about that in this case. If I can get past those procedural barriers, Roseanne's testimony will be heard, and I'm sure that the jury will rule in her favor.
Is there precedent for what you're doing? I mean, are there cases that have argued what you're arguing and succeeded?
Not quite in that particular way. But yeah, there are cases in Massachusetts which have said that if within 3 years of the time you understand you've been harmed, you can bring suit. The problem is that the state Supreme Court has continued to narrow that down. They started by saying, well, by the time you're 16, you ought to know better. Then they said by the time you're 15, you ought to know better. And they are continually restricting it, which was not the intention of the legislature when they passed that particular law. And all over the country, there are concerted efforts being made by defense attorneys. There is a group of people who defend cases involving sexual abuse that are brought against various entities, and they coordinate their efforts throughout the country to beat back the efforts to change these laws and to beat back the efforts of people to use the available laws for them.
What is the criminal statute now?
Very complicated, because in Massachusetts there are a number of different sex crimes, and different crimes have different statutes of limitations. There are some statutes, there are some offenses that only have a 6-year statute of limitations. The crime of incest has a 10-year statute of limitations. The crime of rape has a 15-year statute of limitations. And then within those groups, some specific statutes tell you that the time period will not start to run until the person turns 16. So you take that number of years added onto that. The difficulty is, though, that every time the law is amended and made longer, it can't be made retroactive. Criminal laws cannot be made retroactive because of a prohibition in the United States Constitution. And so in California, when they did away with the civil statute of limitations and created a one-year window during which old civil claims could be brought forward, they attempted also to get rid of the criminal. And the U.S. Supreme Court said you can have the civil, but you can't have the criminal. So people like Roseanne, who are able years later to come forward and talk about their abuse, almost never are in a position to be able to have the person prosecuted. If you were around for the 2002, 2003 clergy abuse cases in Boston, there were a handful of priests out of, 150 who actually got prosecuted because most of the cases were beyond the criminal statute of limitations. The reason the civil statute of limitations and civil suits are so important is that this is the one way in which we can publicize who the perpetrators are when they can't be prosecuted criminally. You can't put them into the sex offender registry. You can't label them. Media outlets won't ordinarily print a story like this one if we hadn't filed a lawsuit. It is the ability to file the lawsuit that gives some qualified immunity to media so they can write about this. And of course, we have a confession in this case. So, we probably wouldn't see the light of day without that ability.
That is the case here, that you can't file criminal charges because the statute's gone.
Criminal statute's gone.
Did you explore other legal avenues prior to the filing the lawsuit? In other words, did you reach out to, I assume Mr. Previtt has a lawyer. Were you hoping to resolve this issue? Poor phrasing, excuse my language. But were you hoping to achieve your goal without a lawsuit, or did the lawsuit come later?
Mr. Previtt and his attorney know about this lawsuit.
And that's all you'll say about that?
Yeah.
I know it says a bit in the complaint, a little bit at the end on relief. So can you explain a little more about what you're seeking for relief in this case?
Well, sure. Let me say something generally about civil suits and money. All a civil suit can do is order the person to pay money. That's the only relief you can get. So, people who come to me, and I explain this to them, they want a couple of things. They want the person to be stopped from doing what they've done before. And by filing the civil suit, we can achieve that to some extent because at least we make people aware of it. Secondly, their lives have been destroyed. I could almost describe 95% of my clients by saying that they haven't finished their education, they've had substance problems, they've had problems with the law, their social relationships, marriage, and things like that have been terrible because that's their life. And the economic impact of sexual abuse on people is just enormous. The U.S. Department of Justice has studies to talk about the impact of crime, and sexual abuse is right up there, and it has a huge impact, not only on the life of the person themselves, but also in the costs that are imposed upon the various systems. Roseanne doesn't have any health insurance. She hasn't been able to work, so in order for her to get the mental health treatment she's had to have a variety of social programs that have helped her there. So, the economic impact of this and getting some recovery from the person involved is the right thing to do. But, the other thing is this, money moves people. And if you can make people pay money, or if people know they're gonna pay money, there is some motivation to make them change their behaviors. And I had clients who received large amounts of money from the clergy abuse settlements in 2003. We got a call about 3 months ago from one of them who lives in Florida, and he said, I need a letter from you about where I got this money because I want to buy a house. I want to make a down payment on a house. And in Florida, you have to have something that identifies the source so they won't think it's drug money. This guy had got that money and didn't touch it, let it just sit there. And I've had other clients do the same thing. People who are sexually abused and get money from someone as a result are not doing it for the money. They think the money, frequently think of the money as being dirty. But the one thing they do want is they want the amount of money they receive to reflect their value as a person. In other words, don't tell me that I'm a worthless person and here's $5 and go away. They don't want a particular amount of money. They just want to know that they are valued. That for the first time in their life, someone is saying, what happened to you was terrible and we can't turn it around, we can't turn your life around, but we're going to tell you by placing a value on it what's appropriate. I had a case in which a Superior Court judge entered default judgments against a priest that abused 2 of my clients recently, and the judge awarded $1 million to one of the plaintiffs and $2 million to the other plaintiff. But what she wrote in the opinion was the most important thing. She said, however, I want to make it clear that no amount of money could possibly make up for the harm that these 2 individuals have suffered at the hands of this priest. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for someone to validate their lives, to say that what happened to you shouldn't have happened, it was wrong, you're a good person, you don't deserve it, and the person who harmed you deserves to have this kind of responsibility.
Clarification about Mr. Praveti's businesses. What exactly does he own? It's not clear in the suit.
I don't know if he still owns the car wash business or if he sold it.
I think that's been
Leachmere?
Yeah, we're not, I'm not aware of what he.
But at one time he did own the
He
car.
did own what was the name? Leachmere?
Car wash.
Porter Square Car Wash.
Porter
but
Square?
it was
Somerville Leachmere.
Somerville
Yeah.
Leachmere, it was a chain of them.
And then he was involved in that Maverick nightclub in North Reading?
Yeah.
So wait, just to clarify, the name of the car wash again is it the Leachmere or is it the Porter Square?
It was PEI Supply.
What is it?
There's a news report I saw that indicated it was Leachmere.
Leachmere Car Wash?
Yeah, I don't know if I have it here, but
Somerville,
he was
Porter
involved.
Square.
He was involved in some
Privy.
litigation.
Okay.
It was a chain of
So
car
he had
washes.
multiple
There's-
car washes.
Yeah. It was
It's the
Somerville Ave Car Wash, Porter Square Car Wash, Leachmere Car Wash right over the Monsignor O'Brien Highway. There was one over by the Holiday Inn, a self-serve, Washington Street.
They're all self-service.
There was gas stations up in Wakefield, Mass. Maverick lounges, hotels. You owned a mall in North Conway. It was a huge business.
Well, so you had hotels, mall, a mall.
Yeah, I could go on. There's lots
But
of
he
stuff.
had car washes in those places.
Car washes were all in Boston.
And then he also owned hotels as well, is that what you're saying?
I forget where the hotel. We were all young. I
Okay.
was 12 when the nightclub was going on. I was 12.
Can you or will you tell us where he is, what he's doing now? Do you know?
Yeah, he lives on
Those are Waltham.
50 Leslie
Yeah.
Road in Waltham.
But is he still running these businesses? What is he doing in terms of?
I don't personally know
Okay.
what he's doing. I mean, I don't think he's impoverished, if that's.
Did he at any time own the Woburn Showcase Cinema?
No.
No, abuse occurred at the cinemas.
But no ownership.
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
What made you ask about the
I
literature?
think it was in here.
It's in the complaint.
Yeah.
Oh, just threw us off a little bit.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you all very much, appreciate it, and talk to me if I need to send you or give you anything else.